good afternoon. I don't want to spend a lot of time just in a bunch of preamble today because we've got a very important guest. We've got a very special guest, and he is our expert for today. And so I want to dedicate as much of our time that we have for him today and to him today, so that then you've also got some time where you can ask your questions and get some, maybe some superb, I shouldn't say maybe, get some superb world-class coaching right here on the call from Nigel himself. So most leaders, I should say most leadership advice comes from people who've never led under real pressure. And isn't that the truth? But that's not the case with our guest today, Nigel Brooke. Nigel spent 25 years in warehousing, logistics, and distribution operations, starting on the shop floor and climbing through every level to executive leadership. He's led real teams through real problems in high pressure environments where results couldn't be faked. I love that. And through all of it, he kept seeing the same patterns. The best leaders weren't the most technically skilled. Now, I'm going to say that again because for some of you on the call, you need to hear that. What he saw was a pattern that the best leaders weren't the most technically skilled. That's good news. They were the most consistent in how they thought, communicated, and responded when it mattered most. Now, today, as I said, and as you can already see, Nigel joins us today to share what he's learned on how you can build the same communication habits, ownership mindset, and leadership presence in yourself and your team. Now, if you're a little confused today, remember we started a new series last week, but we took a little hiccup because we have to come back to get our resident expert today on our last four-part series, which was on workplace culture. So just a little catch up, make sure you're with us. So today, as co-founder of Leadership and Life Coaching, alongside his wife and co-founder Amy, Nigel works with corporate teams, emerging leaders, and professionals who know they're capable of more and are ready to act on it. And doesn't that just describe who we are in this community? We know that you are all emerging leaders and professionals capable of much more than what's already being accomplished, and we know that you're ready to act on it. So buckle in, take some notes, get ready to engage with Nigel near the end of the call as always. But Hector, I'm going to turn the Zoom room over to you. Nigel, great to have you with us today.
Yeah,
Excellent.
thank you. I appreciate the invite, and I'm looking forward to chatting with the team.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. Great intro. And Alan, welcome to the Inner Circle Community Call. And I'm excited to hear a lot about your journey and how you've developed as a leader and really focused in that demographic that is intentional culture building. And as we went through our four-part series, we left our entrepreneurs and our business unit leaders with that mission to go and establish an intentional culture in their workplace. But before we get there, let's get started back in that shop floor. You and I have similar stories in that we came from warehousing, distribution, logistics, and so that was really cool to hear that in your story as well. But you worked all your way up to the executive leadership over 25 years in that journey. What did that climb actually look like for you? Like, what was the job before you were the leader? Like, describe that growth channel that you went through.
Yeah, so I'll kind of go back a bit here to the UK. So obviously, I'm from the UK, emigrated to Canada 14 years ago. But my first, let's say, logistics role was working for Carlsberg Brewery. And my job, I was literally taken on for 6 months, loading keg containers onto a production line with a fork truck. That was it.
Right.
12 hours a day. I'd put them on one end and I'd take them off the other full and load them onto a truck and it'd go off. That's about as basic as it started. And then from there, I've always had this interest. I've always had this interest in people. Before I even really started doing a deep dive into leadership, I've always been interested in people, different people, how they talk, the backgrounds, everything else. So I'm always curious. I'm always curious as to next positions, how people did them positions, what worked, what didn't work. And eventually I just started working my way through the ranks just by being that guy that put his hands up and says, I'll try that, I'll learn that. Not for any other reason apart from I was either bored or just wanted to learn a bit more. And as this went on, these opportunities started coming up that this person seems like, he's curious, he's inquisitive, he wants to learn more. And the opportunities for growth started. So worked my way through the ranks in the UK, running three of the biggest breweries in the UK, in Southern and two in
Wow.
Northern England. And then me and my wife emigrated over to Canada to start fresh. And I literally come to Canada. My wife's CPA, and I was offered a 7-month contract by DHL, closing one of
Okay.
the most established contracts with Hershey chocolate. And I knew without trying to think that I've got any more skills than anybody else, I knew that if I had an opportunity and people were involved, then there's a
Hmm.
good chance I could also build a relatively good career over here. And then I went from there. I worked through DHL, DB Schenker's, opened and closed, non-performing, new RFPs, and then moved into the pharma world and opened 2 and controlled 5 distribution centers across Canada, and then went into telecommunication and opened distribution centers for Apple, where we did a lot of buyback and trading of devices up in Woodbridge. And then that was my last. That was the only part of the warehouse and distribution I'd not touched. I'd done the fast-moving consumer goods. I'd done pharma. I'd never done telecommunication. So that was the kind of final bit before I decided that, okay, I've had enough of it now, and I wanted to build leadership in life because I realized how important leadership is. And I realized
Amazing.
I couldn't get to enough people
Mhm.
working in corporate.
Yeah. It's an interesting, well-rounded path because you received exposure to so many different distribution channels. And
Yeah.
you mentioned all those, and it sounds like a great career path. What I find interesting in that is, all of them had, I'm sure, its own challenges with different personalities, different skill sets, different people. So as you were out there learning and, really establishing your own skill set, what did you see from those people that talked leadership and the people who actually led from all of your corporate experience?
I think for the people that actually led, and I always believe, and I'll be totally honest, I think some of the best leaders I've worked with have had no title.
Mm,
So they've been influential leadership, nothing to do with positional leadership.
right.
But the true leaders that I've certainly had the pleasure of working alongside, as opposed to the ones that pretending to be leaders, let's say, is that they're genuine, they're consistent, and they do what they do with a different mindset. And their number one focus is always revolves back to the people. They're not looking for the praise, they're not looking for the promotion, they're looking for the people. Whatever decision they make is how is this going to affect the team? Uh,
Yeah.
and they're willing, and I know you guys do an amazing job with the whole leadership, spreading the word, but the good leaders are willing to take. I always look at them as like an umbrella over the team. There's a lot that comes down from the seniors, the C-suites. They'll deflect that in order to protect the team because they know how important that team is. Um, so that's the kind of difference for me. I used to see this quite obviously when I'd be sent to new contracts of who was claiming to be the leader and who really was the leaders.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing you touch on that because it's bang on. It's leadership without titles, right? Like we always say that here at OBS in the inner circle is you don't need the title to be a leader. You need to have the drive, the passion, but most importantly, the alignment with what are the critical goals that the organization needs to achieve and that you will be part of helping that organization achieve or your team achieve them.
100%.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that you also have seen that you've noticed it, you've experienced it yourself. But what did it teach you for you as a leader as you became a leader in the corporate, sector?
I think when I started in the corporate sector, I got slightly muddled with the skill set that I was going to need. So
Hmm.
certainly from where I was in distribution, it's are you a systems guy? Are you a process guy? Do you have all this? And yeah, I had all the foundations of that. But as I started my leadership journey, I quickly learned that, but if I can become the leader that I want to be, then all these other things will just fall into place. Because I'm gonna give people the confidence and the knowledge to be able to support me in my role so I can support them. So as
Yeah.
I went into my roles, I just generally just focused on the people. As I went through the journey, instead of just focusing on what do I need, and it wasn't really imposter syndrome, but what do I need to be successful in this role? I just
Hmm.
kept sticking with the fact of if I can get the people on board and if I can empower the people and get the people to be the best they can be, the other sides of it, the systems, the processes, everything else, people are going to want to kind of morph into these roles. And that way we can build something that's going to be that's
Yeah.
pretty special.
And it is true. You name the core values, like as you're describing the people and how they will be the right sort of plug-in. For me, it aligns with core values. If you think about this in actual application, you're doing interviews, you're on the floor, you're even disciplining, but it's always looking at how does this align with what we have built from a corporate objective, and that goes back to core value alignment. You
Yes,
know,
exactly. 100%. Yeah.
you've said that the best leaders weren't the most technically skilled, that they were the most consistent. Can you like unpack that? What do you mean by consistency? What does it actually mean to you day to day?
Yeah, so leaders who are consistent with the message that they're delivering and just how they, from a self-awareness standpoint, how they approach each day. In the distribution world, we all know it's just a roller coaster. Great days, bad days, horrendous days. The leaders that certainly I adopted the mindset of is that we've got to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because the company, because the shop floor, because the DC is having a bad day, that's not for you to cascade that to your staff. Yes, there is corrective action, there's processes for that, but you
Yes.
cannot change your mood swings depending on the volume, SLAs, KPIs, anything like that. You have to be consistent, or I believe you have to be consistent on the message you're cascading down to your team. Whether it's a
Yeah.
win, it's praise, whether it's not, it's how do we regroup and overcome the challenge. But you can't. I've seen too many managers and too many senior leaders fail because they let emotions get on top of them when things go wrong. And
Mm,
that cascades down to the team. And then they're going to spend the next however many days, weeks, months, years, if ever, trying to build that confidence again. So consistency
yeah.
to me is a leader coming in every day. There's going to be different challenges. Some are good, some are bad. But how you approach your team, how you respect your team, how you empower your team from a psychologically safe environment, that has to
Right.
stay the same no matter what.
So essentially it's having a framework that allows you to be consistent and knowing what playbook tactics to use, right? We were talking about, the World Cup, as we were getting into the meeting, but if you think about, the playbook plays, something goes wrong, regardless if it's logistics, any business, you'll have something go wrong. It could be process, it could be people. It's going to happen. It's just eventually. So how do you adapt to going wrong and being consistent in your approach?
I think, again, I always come back to my team. Usually within the team, when I were in the corporate world, we would have experts in certain fields. So depending, so we have a system. Let's just say we lose a WMS, whatever it may
Sure.
be. So then we're either going to go back to wherever it's come from, or I would then get the team together, explain the situation, don't leave everyone in limbo, drawing up their own
Mhm.
conclusions of what's happened. I would do a quick debrief of exactly what the situation is, and then I would have my thoughts, which I bring forward, like are we going to have to go manual? Are we going to have to start reaching out to carriers, customers, whatever it might be? But before I'd even pull a trigger on anything, I would throw it back to the experts because they're doing this job 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I may be out there mingling 1, 2 hours a day. So
Yeah.
when things like that happen, I was heavily involved with not going silo and thinking, right, I know what the answer is here because self-aware enough to not be ignorant to think I do. And it would be straight back out, go to the expert in the field, if it is IT, ask
Mhm.
them what their thoughts, have they seen this before, and then get the escalation plan in place. But not
Sure.
pull the trigger, not hit the panic button, sit down, have the conversations, pull in the right experts.
Yeah. And in the way you've described it, in that methodology, also besides being consistent as is in the approach, you start to sense a level of trust that is built in with that consistency, that consistent message, the consistent approach, theories, the deliverables. So, from a, you know, leader's perspective, how different is it when you have that trust as a leader, when you're that, like, from when you're able to build it to those that can't connect, and instead just they're leaders that people tolerate, but they're not leaders people trust. Have you seen that sort of dynamic out there?
Yeah, and I think this swings back to positional leadership. Um, from me, my four pillars are self-awareness, communication, empathy, and ethics. And I think
Hmm.
from an ethics standpoint and building your brand, that's what comes into the trust part. And if, as a leader, if you don't have trust, you're going to have a difficult task because the world at the moment is probably the least trusting it's been with politicians and news media and everything else. So we don't need to add more or compound the issue by not having trust from your leader. So
Yeah.
to build that trust, it's obviously you've got to be honest, you've got to be transparent, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You've got to be professional. You've got
Yes.
to also make sure that people have confidence in you, whether it be um, failings. I go back to psychological safety. People have to be confident to know that if they fail, if they make a mistake, if they don't know what to do, they feel comfortable enough to come up to you. The ones that don't have the trust, I find these end up being quite lonely leaders because
Hmm.
what happens is everything goes behind closed doors on the shop
Yeah.
floor. People just keep the things to themselves because they're scared to express what's happened. You know, if there has been a mistake, if it's just highlighted, we can cycle count, we can find. If it's not, then we have a whole bigger issue that's halfway around the world. So
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you're right. What happens is silos is start to surface when people can't trust leaders, and it starts to create division. So therefore, it becomes a very chaotic workplace where people aren't sure about the right messaging, and then they start working on what they believe are priorities versus true priorities. And so it's tough. But how can a leader today establish trust? Because they're playing that fine line. I hear this from business owners all the time. They're like, is too much information a good thing, a bad thing? Should I tell them the good and bad and the ugly? Like, what is your approach to being truthful and transparent?
I think you've got to be respectful of your team. And again,
Mhm.
everything's a different situation. It depends on what your team is. If they're a younger generation, older generation, what the dynamics is of that thing. But I think if you know your team enough,
Yeah.
you can be professional enough to give out. You should be able to judge what the right information is. You don't need to go into the warts and alls of everything that's happened. If you don't think, hey, that's going to benefit how they perform, or it's going to strike fear into how they perform, then you
Yeah.
make that judgment that, you know, I'm not going to share that with you because I don't think that's going to benefit with you. But I think the transparency is key. And I'm actually I was doing a chat the other week about pre-shift
Oh
and
yeah.
how important pre-shift is or the perfect pre-shift is the 15 minutes that shapes your day. And that's a perfect point of being as transparent as you can to give your team as much information as you can that's going to benefit them and benefit operations.
Right. And I love the pre-shift because I'm always a big fan of performance huddles, and you can see these as pre-shifts, mid-shifts, end of shifts, but it all tackles communication, and it's in the communication, the setup, the transparency, the challenge that's being communicated that all aligns activity for that week. But what is one of the biggest or critical mistakes that you see in leaders today as it comes to communication and being transparent? What's a big constant mistake you see?
I think I'm going to go back to self-awareness. I think we have this notion, or certainly leaders have this notion that communication is all about speaking
Mm,
when we know it's about listening. And I think that's where a lot of leaders make the mistake. I think
yes.
I'm a good communicator. I speak clearly. I can string a sentence together. So I'm a good communicator. And the bit we always seem to miss is that you're a good listener. And
Hmm.
an old person says to me a lot of years ago, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. So we should listen twice as much. And I've always believed in that. We don't gain nothing. We don't learn nothing from speaking, but we learn everything from listening. So I think that's one of the things that people do overlook a lot. And there's so much information and so much out there of how you can know your team more if you just take the time to listen.
Yeah, and listening is so critical for building those intentional components
Mm.
because you can actually start to surface true issues when you just close your mouth and let people speak, right? You don't have to assume you know all the answers. Let your let your people who are actually doing the work talk about the issues, surface them, and then let them go to work to fix them. So it's interesting. I'm going to shift a little bit into, your model around leadership, and you talked about an ownership mindset. So let's define ownership for someone who isn't an owner in a business, someone who's just a business unit leader, but that they have that responsibility. How would you describe that for the group?
I think ownership is obviously you have the full control over everything, and everything, as far as how I look at ownership, is I have the top tier of everything that's going to happen, but
Hmm.
how as a team can we build what we're trying to build here? So I don't mind being up here and you know having my neck on the line for everything that happens with ownership, especially in a business standpoint, because the book's going to stop with you. But I also appreciate that I'm not smart enough. I don't have all the answers to be able to do it on my own.
Yeah. And so there's like a very clear distinction between ownership and accountability in
Mhm.
this case. And so it's important that, like that we hear that from your perspective, because people might think, well, I'm accountable, so that means that I'm providing ownership to my task. But there is a distinction. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, I think ownership and accountability, I think just the wording for me, ownership usually it gets people more engaged because they're taking ownership of something. Accountability feels like you're in trouble if it goes wrong. You are accountable for what's going to happen here.
Right.
So for me, when somebody's used to turn around and say, I've taken ownership of something, that to me means on their own steam, they're passionate about doing it. If someone
Hmm.
says to me, I'm accountable for it, it's usually saying, I'm kind of to blame if all goes wrong for it because it's I'm accountable. So that's how I kind of define ownership and accountability. At the end of the day, the kind of main purpose of you have the overall kind of range of making sure it's carried out, but
Yes.
there's two slightly different definitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we teach our entrepreneurs and business unit leaders is to establish an accountability chart so that you understand who is accountable for the output
Yeah,
that is communicated and is understood in the organization. But when you talk about the ownership piece, I believe that that's a skill. That's something that you as an individual start to either redefine or define as you grow and you become really connected to the activity and you take ownership in the results,
yeah.
right? And so it's interesting, like, to hear from your experience and what you've seen out there, because we talk about these things with our entrepreneurs, and we often get asked that, like, how can I teach somebody ownership? And it's a tough one.
It is, yeah. But again, it's down to people have to buy into what the belief, whatever that task is that they're doing. Because for someone to take ownership and carry it out effectively, they've really got to be emotionally involved with it. Certainly, that's what I've experienced. The
Yes.
results have been better when people are certainly engaged.
Yeah, and being aligned with those goals, right? So that they're not off to left field, and where they're working on something that they think is adding value, later find out that they're not. So
Yeah.
now, it's tough. Like we have many different priorities in our businesses that we work in, and it creates different frustration points. And under pressure, leaders break. Sometimes they try to persuade this sort of idea that they try to communicate this strong leadership presence, and the pressure gets to them. They crack and they start to revert back to their natural state. And this is something that I see with entrepreneurs, especially when they're learning, when they're young, and they still don't know how to balance that. What do you see as something that leaders that go under pressure that feels right at the moment, but it actually hurts them more than it helps?
Um, I think just before we start that question, everyone, from a leadership standpoint, certainly on my journey, people like everyone's going to make mistakes. There's no perfect playbook for this. You're going to learn stuff the right way, the wrong way, but you're going to learn stuff. I think one of the things for me with this is the mistakes that they make is sometimes they can either, I'm just going to give a scenario here where a facility's got issues. They'll either jump into the team thinking that if I jump in from a hands-on standpoint, I'm going to be able to save the day and change everything up. instead
Yeah.
of being the steerer of the ship. And I think all that does is causes confusion. Your team
Yes.
usually have a structure, a process that they adhere to. You come in and try overruling it. You come in and try and throw your ideas about with the best intent. You're probably going to do more damage. Um, or the other thing is, if you do make a decision it's wrong, I've done this a ton of times. I just literally walked out of my office. I've took a walk. I've had a chat. I've come back. I've reread what I'm meant to be doing, and then I've kind of picked myself up and gone again.
Yeah, and it's important to have that opportunity to express that you're human. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah,
There's no perfect being out there, right? And so being vulnerable and saying, I owned it. I made this mistake, guys. This was on me. Let's move forward. Let's go. Let's try something differently. But
and I
what
think, sorry, Hector, just from that, I think you've touched on something then that's so valuable. When you've got a leader that'll hold their hands up and say, not my mistake. I'm going to take that full, especially when they'll do it in front of their senior leadership team. I were always a strong believer that it's an unthanked position sometimes because even when things went wrong that weren't your fault, you were still stood there saying, "We made a mistake," not this person. We made a mistake, but to be able to turn around to your team and say, "Yeah, this is on me, guys. I'm really sorry. We've put ourselves behind, but I'm hoping we can get back to where we need to be."
Yeah. And it's about going back to that trust building, right? Because as a unit leader, business owner, it you're that's you. Like you're the ultimate accountability point. And so
Yeah,
therefore it starts, it ends with you. And so if you can say, hey, that's on me. I missed it in my planning. Although I delegated that task, I probably didn't communicate that effectively, or I didn't see that through. That's where the crack was. That's okay. I'm going to learn from this. We're going to plan better next time. We're going to execute better because we're going to plan better. And you just are able to move on and have it as a learning experience.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's amazing to hear that. And you've obviously worked with many different industries out there outside of just logistics. I'm curious to see if you see sort of a pattern in all of the different industry that you work with when it comes to leadership gaps today.
I think the biggest challenge we've got now, and this isn't even just in the work environment, I think this is just in society, is communication. I think
Mhm.
it's we're in a position currently where the art of being able to stand in front of somebody and actually have a hold a conversation, listen, talk, it's getting more and more difficult. And I can see these gaps now. We did a speech at Guelph University, and it was so evident that people feel more comfortable texting you than they
Yes.
are actually talking to you. I was chatting to students that had just been in the classroom with the buddies, and then as soon as they left, they were texting them to see what they were doing. I'm like, you've been sat with a guy for 8 hours. So I think this part of the communication is the biggest void that if we don't get that right now, we're
Yeah.
going to start actually, as a society, we're going to start going further and further into its shells. So
Wow.
this is something I'm super, super passionate about. Strategic communication, how we can get communication better, doing literally what we're doing now. And I think
Yeah.
that is the biggest gap because we don't talk enough.
It's interesting because again, as we challenged our teams to go be intentional about the culture, the communication component was left a bit vague, and it was left up to the entrepreneur and leader to go figure that out, go find your communication style. And so to hear you reinforce that as a gap, it's interesting because we hear it. We're like, I told them to do this. I gave them the SOP. But did you set them up? Like, did you actually do that, or did you text them the SOP?
Yeah. Yeah. Or did you just email them an SOP and kind of work it out yourself?
Yeah. And that's where you expose yourself for things going wrong, right? And you're like, well, they should have known. Well, no, there's a methodology to this. You should be able to walk the individual through the SOP, get alignment, get to do the clarity point check in, and then let them try, provide feedback, right? It's a slow approach, but it is the approach that will help genuinely build up the individuals for success.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, excuse me. You and your wife, you've co-founded Leadership in Life Coaching. Amazing. What made you leave the world of operations and corporate world to teach this full time and teach this to others?
Like I said earlier, I think I've been fortunate enough to see throughout my career how powerful leadership is. I think it's the one skill I would encourage anybody to get on board, to get invested in. It gives you
Mhm.
such an advantage as you go through whatever you want to do in life. You want to be corporate, entrepreneur, business owner, whatever you want to be. If you can master these skills, I think it gives you such an advantage. And that was the reason why we realized in his corporate roles we couldn't reach enough people. So
Mm.
we started doing the the leadership in life membership. And one of the main drivers behind it and how the membership kind of works is we get guest speakers in, we interview them to find out their fears, doubts, imposter syndrome, public speaking challenges. But it's an ongoing education that we're very passionate about. I've been on leadership workshops, 2 days, lots of information, and the chances of going away and retaining it all for some people can be tricky. You go back to your 9 to 5, you try and implement it, you retain on average about 27 to 35%.
That's
So,
right.
so for us, it was always leadership has to be an ongoing thing. It has
Yeah.
to be drip fed to you. There has to be like what you've got here. There has to
Hmm.
be that system, that point of contact, where we're constantly talking leadership, talking self-awareness, empathy, talking visionary, talking all these things constantly. We can't just get people together. It's a box ticking exercise. You've had your leadership training, go be successful. So
Yeah.
that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to do it this way.
Yeah.
And with the guest speakers that we have was another thing of learn from the experts that have failed so you don't have to, or have won, and how did they win?
Exactly, and that's a very similar approach to what we are doing with our entrepreneurs, and really bringing a lot of experts here to have them hear directly from them, so that they are not out there doing the same mistakes and having those exposures, right? And so, it's funny, we have many founder-led business owners in our community, and what's interesting to me is, what messaging would you say that they would need to focus on? What's the first leadership habit that they should build in themselves before asking it of their teams?
We always say that self-awareness is the starting point. I think you need to know
Okay.
your own strengths, your own weaknesses, the areas that you need to work on, the areas that you're interested in working on, before you can then start building the team or cascading that information to a team. Um,
Hmm.
it's always hard to ask someone to do something if you don't really know if you can do it, or if you like
Hmm.
doing it, or if you're not sure if you're good at it. So self-awareness for us is always the first step, and it's
Interesting.
simple. We do a really simple test where we just ask three close friends a slew of questions like, when you're talking to me, do I give eye contact? And be honest. And every time that we've asked people, and there's like 10 different questions, the feedback that they get, well, I never really knew that about myself. I never knew that when I'm talking to you, I always have my phone in my hand, in which case I'm more interested in my phone than I am you. All these things that people, I've yet to have anyone come back and say, oh, yeah, I knew that. Every single one, there's always one thing like, I never knew that I yawned when you talked. I never knew that I was looking at that car over you. I just didn't know these things. And we don't until we self assess. And people
Yes.
say to us, Nigel, just an FYI, you never really look at me when you're chatting, or you're too busy looking at it, So for us, it's self awareness is the first thing because that's the foundation of, right, I know me. If I don't know
Absolutely.
me, how can I start building people?
Yes, yeah, I love it. It's and we referred to that as having those mirror to like self on the mirror moments, and being honest with yourself, right? And sort of checking
100%.
yourself.
And then we say that empathy is just self awareness turned inside out.
I like it. No, that's excellent. Great stuff. And I'm excited to think about sort of the people that are listening in. Again, we always talk about, the besides the owners in the room, the second line leaders, those individuals that are being tasked with supervising, managing, leading others out there. What would be the first thing that you'd want a first time second line leader to focus on? What would set them up for success?
I think this is more just generally for any leadership. You just get to know your people. Take the
Mhm.
time, especially if you're being promoted into a new role. Make sure you build in that time. And I know sometimes it's easier said than done. We get these new roles, we get thrown into KPIs, SLAs, targets, all this kind of stuff. But really, really, if you get that spare moment, instead of using it to go out, get to know your people, because I think that's where a lot of them fail. A lot of them will have, a lot of senior leaders, first line leaders will be happy to stay in the office and think that the laptop is going to give them the answers. It's not, it's the tool. That's what
Mhm.
helps us do his job. But the answers are out on the shop floor. So
Yes.
any kind of leadership, any kind of manager, you're going to find your answers on your shop floor. You're not going to
Yes.
find them in your office. That's just to wrap things up and put a bow on it.
Yeah.
Everything's out there, just waiting for you to discover.
Oh man, you brought me back to something on my old trucking days, and you hit it right on. Whenever I was tasked with finding a solution to a problem, I did not hesitate to jump in the truck with the drivers and actually do the ride alongs and
Yeah.
experience the live and you know, highway driving. I didn't mind jumping into the truck in the middle of the night, departing, from the northern Alberta route, going to Edmonton and back to northern Alberta all night long in the truck with the drivers. But it was because of what you just talked about. Is get to know your people, get to understand what their life is like, what are the challenges they're facing, because they'll also have the potential solutions to the issues that you're trying to solve as a leader.
Mm. And for that there, Hector, another simple thing that I've always done is when you get introduced to a new team, if you've got a new role, always try and learn them individuals' names. Go
Yes.
out of your way to try and learn the names. I'm terrible with names,
Yeah.
but I always used to try and learn a name and try and remember something because it makes such a difference on the morning of saying, "Good morning, Hector." And if you can learn a little bit, like, how was your weekend? Did you go skiing with your kids, like you said? That's a different conversation than "Good morning, Hector."
Yes.
Now I've
Yes.
crossed that boundary of he's genuinely got an interest in me. And now
Yes.
you're starting to build that relationship, that trust, and that involvement.
Absolutely. I think that's a great one because it really starts to build a connection, a genuine connection.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, all right. Now, one last question here. Now, what's one leadership myth that you'd like to kill?
That you're born a leader. I think
Oh,
I think
yes.
people turn around and say you're born a leader. I don't believe anybody's born a leader. I think people throughout the childhood develop skills from the parents that maybe more, they might be more social, they might be more structured, they might be more empathetic. But to say someone's born a leader, I don't genuinely believe you're born a leader. And I never ever believe that you actually end up being a complete leader. I think
Yes.
you're always learning. John Maxwell,
Absolutely.
78-year-old, still learning how elements of leadership. So you're never born a leader and you never stop learning to be a leader.
Amazing. Those are great nuggets of information, right? And it's so true. Is don't assume that people are born with it. People are actively working on this as they evolve. And so
Yeah.
continue to learn, continue to challenge yourself to rise to the next level. That's great. Great stuff, Nigel. Now, how do our people listening in on our socials and our communication channels, how do they get a hold of you? How do they learn more about you, Nigel?
Yeah, we have a website, Leadership in Life Coaching. We're on all socials. My wife's Instagram is Journey to Confidence because she's high on the communication. I'm Nigel Brooke Leadership on the Facebook.
Amazing.
Anyone reach out on LinkedIn? I love connecting to anyone on LinkedIn. More than happy to spend time chatting to people, communicating with people. Love leadership.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, I certainly can attest to you making yourself available. We've had a few chats back and forth on LinkedIn. And so I certainly appreciate you being available to me and obviously to the listeners here. You got to reach out to Nigel if you got leadership questions, if you're being intentional about building the right culture in your workplace. Nigel's the guy. He's certainly been doing it for over 25 years. He's got lots of experience in this specific niche framework. And so I encourage all of you to reach out to Nigel.